My name is Monica Brown, and I teach 8th grade U.S. History and Social Studies at Key Middle School. Today we're going to look at how the Constitution was ratified. And so our lesson titled Ratifying the Constitution will look at some of the issues surrounding coming to an agreement to make sure that our Constitution worked for us. But before we get started, there are a couple of things I do need you to have. You will need to have a pen or pencil, and you will need to have paper. And of course, if you like writing in your journal, you most certainly can use that. So let's take a look at our learning targets and see specifically what we will be covering in this lesson. You will analyze the arguments of the Federalist and Anti-Federalist, including those of Alexander Hamilton, Patrick Henry, James Madison, and George Mason. And then you will be able to identify different points of view of political parties and interest groups on his important historical figures. So now let's take a look at Federalist leaders and the Federalist Papers. You know, limited governments help prevent abuse of citizens and individual rights in a representative democracy. What were the arguments of the Federalists when drafting the Constitution? Well, as we get into our lesson, I want you to do an activity with me. You are going to create a constitutional convention party. You are throwing the party, and your party is to rewrite the Constitution. So from this list, I want you to choose two people that you would love to invite to your party and to help you rewrite the Constitution. We have George Washington, Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Abigail Adams, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison. All of these people are on your invite list. But you have to choose two people that you want to come to help you rewrite your Constitution. I'm going to give you about a minute to look over the list and choose two people that you would like to have to help you rewrite the Constitution at your party. So, who was invited? Okay, so let's see who accepted our invitation. Who invited Jefferson? Now, if you invited Jefferson, too bad, he's going to be out of town. How about Washington? Did you invite Washington? You're in luck. He's in, he's coming. He will be there. What about Patrick Henry? Unfortunately, he won't be attending. Sorry. Who wants Benjamin Franklin to be there? He said he will be there. Who invited John Adams? Did you choose John Adams? He sends his regards, and he will be out of the country. Who invited Abigail, his wife? Oops, this is 1788. No women allowed. And who invited Alexander Hamilton? He replied with a yes. So good for you if you invited Alexander Hamilton. And what about James Madison? Did you invite James Madison to your party? Well, you're in luck. He will be there too. You know, many of the people at the Constitutional Convention, including Hamilton and Madison, were Federalists. All right, so let's take a look at Alexander Hamilton's arguments and see what exactly he believed in. Okay, argument number one. Are there treaties for which we are responsible? These are constantly and shamelessly violated. What problem do you think that Alexander Hamilton is describing here? And what is a possible solution? So let's look at this argument in detail and see if we can break it down. Treaties. So what is he talking about when he's talking about a treaty? maybe an agreement between two countries. And so he's saying, are there agreements for which we are responsible? Have we violated, have we held up our end of the bargain on these treaties? Has the other country held up their end of the bargain? What would be a possible solution? Well, Alexander Hamilton believed that a stronger national government would have been the answer to making sure that treaties were observed. Now let's look at argument number 2. Do we owe debts to foreigners and to our own citizens? These debts remain unpaid. What problem is Hamilton describing here? Well, it looks like he's referring to money that we owe. Remember, that's what a debt is, money that you owe someone. And so he's asking, don't we owe money to other countries? And don't we owe money to our own people, our own citizens? We haven't even done that. So what is a possible solution that Hamilton came up with? Well, he believed again that a stronger national government would have been the answer to making sure that all national debts had been paid. Let's look at argument number 3. Have we valuable territories in the possession of a foreign power which ought to have surrendered a long time ago? These are still being kept. What do you think Hamilton is describing here? What's the problem? Well, I think he's referring to Great Britain. Great Britain is still here. They should have left a long time ago. They should have surrendered that land a long time ago. But there's no accountability. There's no one to say, Britain, you got to get out of here. So the problem was that we still had territories that were in the possession of Great Britain. What was a possible solution that Hamilton believed in? A stronger national government that would have made sure that Britain had owned up to what they said they were going to do. And then let's look at our final and 4th argument. Is commerce of importance to national wealth? Our trade is at its lowest ebb. What problem is Hamilton describing here? And what is a possible solution? Looks like Hamilton is saying that in order for the country to be financially successful, we need to make sure that we have a healthy trade agreement with other countries. We're not doing so well right now. So what was his possible solution to it? A stronger national government. He truly believed in a central, strong national government. All right, so let's look at analyzing primary sources. By now, I think you know what a primary source is. So we're going to look at the Federalist Papers and look at some excerpts from the Federalist Papers. So, how did Federalists persuade people to support their point of view? You know, several Federalists wrote a series of essays, and these were known as the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers explained how the government should be organized, and they focus on 3 basic ideas. 1, the Constitution separated the powers of the national government. 2, the Constitution creates a federal form of government. That is, power will be divided between states and the national government. 3, the Constitution sets up a republic where the people will be represented by elected officials. So the following excerpts that I'm going to read through are from the Federalist Papers, and they were written by James Madison in 1788. Each excerpt addresses one of the 3 basic Federalist ideas. Remember, those ideas were 1, separation of powers, 2, a federal form of government where power is divided between states and national government, and 3, a republic where the people will be represented by elected officials. Okay, so let's look at Federalist Paper 39, titled The Conformity of the Plan to Republican Principles. I'm going to read along and I want you to follow along with me. We may define a republic to be a government which derives all of its powers directly or indirectly from the great body of the people and is administered by persons holding their offices during pleasure for a limited period or during good behavior. It is sufficient for such a government that the persons administering it be appointed either directly or indirectly by the people. So let's break this down and let's find out which idea is Madison referring. What is it that he's talking about here? He starts off by saying we may define a republic to be, all right, and then he goes on. So we know that he's talking about a republic. And then he goes in and he says, a government which derives its powers, basically gets its powers directly or indirectly, okay? Indirectly meaning that you have elected someone to speak on your behalf, or directly, you have gone and you've made your own vote from the great body of the people, from the people. So a government that gets its powers basically from us and is administered by persons holding their offices during pleasure, okay, for a limited period. So he's addressing this issue. We don't want someone to be in there forever, okay? You're getting your powers from us, and we're going to let you know that you can only be in there for so long. And even if you are in there, you must make sure that you are obeying all of the rules, good behavior, as he points out. What idea do you think that Madison is referring to? Is he talking about a separation of powers here? Is he talking about a federal form of government or power that will be divided between states and the national government? Or is he talking about a republic where the people will be represented by elected officials? I think that he's talking about a republic. He is specifically pointing out that the government gets its power from the people. He is specifically talking about how it will be governed, how, if you're holding office, that it is for a limited amount of time. So it looks like the idea that he is referring to is a republic. Let's take a look at the second one. This is Federalist Paper 46, the influence of the state and federal governments compared. So it looks like he's saying the federal and state governments are in fact different agents and trustees of the people, constituted with different powers and designed for different purposes. The powers proposed to be lodged in the federal government are as little formidable, dangerous to those reserved to the individual states, as they are indispensably necessary to accomplish the purposes of the Union. There's a lot of big words here, I know. Let's break this down. What is it that he's really saying here? He says it in that first sentence. The federal and state governments they're different. They have different things that they need to accomplish. They have different powers and they are designated for different purposes. So if we really focus on what's being said here, what do you think that Madison is referring to in this one? Is he talking about a separation of powers here? Or is he talking about a federal form of government where the power will be divided between states and the national government? We've already said that a republic, we've already assigned the last one. So we know it's a republic, is what we talked about previously. It looks like here that Madison is referring to a federal form of government where the power is divided between the states and the national government. Let's take a look at the next one. This is Federalist Paper 47, the particular structure of the new government and the distribution of power among its different parts. I can probably already tell you I know what Madison is referring to here just by reading the title. It says structure of the new government, and it's talking about distribution of power among its different parts. Okay, that already lets me know that he's probably talking about how the government is going to be formed. But I won't jump to conclusions yet. Let's read through it. Having reviewed the general form of the proposed government and the general mass of power allotted to it, I proceed to examine the particular structure of this government and the distribution of this mass of power among its parts. The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, looks like he's talking about 3 branches here, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. So what is Madison talking about here? Well, we know from the title that he's talking about how the structure of the government should be. And then as we read through, he's talking about this distribution of a mass of power. I think that Madison is very careful to point out he doesn't want to have another King George III on his hands. We've already been through that in the 13 colonies. We know what that feels like. To say that the accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, those are the 3 branches of government, in the same hands. Okay, if we put all of that power in the same hands, doesn't matter if it's one person or a small little group of people, that's not good. You're bordering on tyranny. We don't want that. So it looks like Madison is referring to the separation of powers. He knows that we must have different branches that take care of this. We cannot have one person or just a small little group in charge of all of this power. We would have tyranny on our hands, okay? So now let's take a quick look at Anti-Federalists. What were the Anti-Federalist arguments against the ratification of the Constitution? Okay, so we know what a Federalist is. We know what a Federalist believes in. Federalists believed in a strong national government. What do you think Anti-Federalists believed in? You know, anti means against. So they were against, I'm going to assume, a strong national government. But let's read a little bit more to find out. What was the main goal of the Federalists? Again, to create a strong national government. So if we know that Federalists wanted a strong national government, what do you think the Anti-Federalists wanted? They wanted a weak national government. They wanted stronger state governments. Why do you think that's so? Why do you think they did not want to have a strong national government? What were they afraid of? Here's Patrick Henry. Patrick Henry makes this point here, and he says, my great objection to this government is that it does not leave us the means of defending our rights or of waging war against tyrants. Let's look at that again. His great objection is basically that he doesn't feel like it gives him any sort of leeway to defend his own rights. I think he's thinking that if there's a stronger national government, it's going to take away rights from the people, and you're going to create more tyrants, exactly like King George III. He doesn't want that again. So Anti-Federalists believed that the Constitution would create a government that the people could not control. They argued that a strong national government in a large nation would be likely to abuse its power. They had finished fighting a revolution, okay? Remember this, we've been talking about this American Revolution, where basically we're fighting to get away from this tyranny and worried that the Constitution might be too familiar and too similar to what they fought to get rid of. Okay, so I guess I can see what his point is. I guess I can kind of see what Anti-Federalists were worried about. It's not that they didn't want to have a government that worked. They wanted to make sure that you didn't have a small group of people or one person making all of the decisions. He was adamant that the people be in charge of the government. So, what were the concerns of the Anti-Federalists? Anti-Federalists were worried that a strong national government would not protect individual rights. They believed that if the United States created a government with a strong national government, it would be similar to a monarchy, or worse, a tyranny. So, what was the main argument against ratification? What is it that the Anti-Federalists were against? Well, they were against a lack of protection of individual rights, the government becoming too powerful. So, in order to ratify the Constitution, the Anti-Federalists wanted the promise of a Bill of Rights, which would guarantee certain liberties to the people of the United States. Which group, the Federalists or the Anti-Federalists, protected the rights and welfare of the people the most? Well, let's take a look, all right? And we're going to do a quick little game here, and it's called Who Said It? You're going to have to figure out who made the comments. Was it a Federalist or was it an Anti-Federalist? All right, so you have your Federalist. We have Alexander Hamilton and James Madison on one side. And then we have the Anti-Federalists. We have Patrick Henry and George Mason on the other side, okay? So here comes our battle. Let's see what they're saying. Who said this? I want a strong federal government. Was that a Federalist or was that an Anti-Federalist? Who do you think said it? Let's find out. A Federalist. Remember, Federalists wanted a strong national government. Here's our next one. I will not ratify the Constitution without a Bill of Rights. Who said that? A Federalist or an Anti-Federalist? Let's see. Anti-Federalist. They did not want a strong national government, but they were willing to say, all right, if we do have to have this, you're going to have to give us a Bill of Rights, something that guarantees that the people have rights. Here's our next one. The only way to defend our country is to create a strong and wealthy union. All right, who said that? The only way to defend our country is to create a strong and wealthy union. Was that a Federalist or was that an Anti-Federalist? Let's take a look. It was a Federalist, okay? Very good. And let's look at one last one. Our government should be able to collect taxes to repay our debts. Was that a Federalist or an Anti-Federalist? A Federalist. Remember, if we go back to Alexander Hamilton's arguments, this was one of the things he wanted to talk about. We need to be able to kind of pay our bills. Strong national government. So that was the Federalist point of view. And a strong central government will turn into another king. We just spent years fighting to get rid of one. Who said that? Is that a Federalist point of view or an Anti-Federalist point of view? Anti-Federalist. They did not want another King George III on their hands. They did not want to go through that. Everything they fought for was to make sure that that never happened again, and they were very worried about that. All right, so let's look at this debate over ratification. When the Constitution Convention ended in Philadelphia in September of 1787, the official records of its proceedings were turned over to George Washington so that he could give them to Congress if ever formed under the Constitution. There was nothing certain about whether the young nation would, become the new Constitution would make it. According to the rules of the convention, the Constitution was to be submitted to the states for approval. or ratification by state conventions. The debates in Philadelphia were over, but the fight had just begun. Opponents of this new constitution were known as Anti-Federalists. They included such patriots as Patrick Henry and George Mason. The Anti-Federalists found several major problems in the new constitution proposed at the Philadelphia Convention. They argued it would create a central government that would be too strong. As a result, it might threaten individual liberties, such as the right to petition and speak about the government. Anti-Federalists also fear future government leaders might build a strong army to collect unpopular taxes. So finally, the Anti-Federalists believed that the new Constitution gave way too much power to the central government at the expense of state governments. They felt that a strong central government might undermine states' rights, especially regarding issues such as slavery and taxation. The Anti-Federalists wanted a Bill of Rights in the new Constitution to protect individual freedoms. The Anti-Federalists stated that they would not ratify the Constitution unless the Federalists agreed to add one. Anti-Federalists argued for a plan of government that would, in their opinion, best protect the rights and welfare of the people. So, in the end, to obtain the necessary votes for ratification or approval, Federalists promised to add a Bill of Rights. With this assurance, by the end of 1788, 11 states had voted to ratify the U.S. Constitution. So this is the question that I'm going to leave you with today. We went over a lot of information. Which group, the Anti-Federalists or the Federalists, protected the rights and welfare of the people the most? That is definitely something to think about. Remember, the Federalists wanted a strong national government. They felt like they were protecting the people by making sure that there was a separation of powers, that one person or a small group would never be able to have all of that power to themselves. So on one hand, the Federalists believed that they were protecting the people. The Anti-Federalists said, hold on. You're not addressing the risk of not allowing the people to have a say. You're not addressing the risk that we could have another monarchy or another King George on our hands. So which group, the Anti-Federalists or the Federalists? Which one protected the rights and welfare of the people the most? That's something for you to think about. And what I would do maybe is use a graphic organizer, make a T-chart. On one side, do Federalist, and on the other side, do Anti-Federalist. Maybe something a lot like this. And cite your evidence of everything that you know about Anti-Federalists and Federalists. What do you know and what do you remember about the Federalists? What is it they wanted to accomplish? And then what is it that the Anti-Federalists wanted to accomplish? Thank you so much for joining me today. We had a lot of information that we went over, but I'm pretty sure that you did well. I'm Monica Brown, and I teach 8th grade U.S. History and Social Studies at Key Middle School. Bye.